A neighborhood may cost $8,000 per water tap. So you have to take those costs into account. Who is taking that on? Is that the developer, or are you going to put that onto the builder as part of your lot fees?
How long does development normally take?
I'd say 9 months. And I'm thinking about a specific project. If you don't have water, you don't have home sites, you don't have anything. Just because you don't have water lines doesn't automatically mean you can just
It's game over.
It's not, I mean, you might be able to drill a well, but still you might not be able to.
Today on the Land Dealer podcast, we have
Megan Turnipseed.
Okay, well, happy to have you, Megan. How's your day going?
Good. Just wrapped up a 4-session class with Realtor Land Institute earlier today. So yeah, it's been a busy one.
A 4-session? What type of class?
So it's that same subdivision class that we took together, but it's the online version where they do 2 hours once a week for 4 weeks. So it's a condensed version that I have to kind of speed through.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, you were able to get the in-person one that I think is a little bit better.
I always
be able to network.
Yeah, I always feel like in-person is definitely better. But I always like to let my guests know a little bit more about you. If you can talk about how you got into real estate and where you are now.
Yeah, so I was able to get my license in 2008, just after I graduated school, and didn't realize it was right about the time when the market was on its way to do its fun little crash that we saw at that time. And luckily with my business degree, I was able to figure out ways to continually make money when the market was a little bit lower and really learn from the best. So been doing mostly residential for those first few years. And then after that, I was able to get a mentor who brought me into the land sales side. And now more than half of my business has to do with either raw or rural properties being sold and subdivided, or true development projects, and working somewhere in the process of getting it from dirt to the sticks and bricks up.
Yeah, that is one thing's kind of unique about you, is that most people, when it comes to just raw land or vacant lots, it's not something they do. It's just something like 99% of all realtors are just focused on like house sales.
Yeah.
But you've put it is a big part of your business, obviously 50%. How did you, or what made you decide, like, I want to put my focus in this area?
Probably the fact that I grew up more in a robust city and suburban area, came down to Central Texas to go to school and college in an area where I actually saw land and cattle in areas that hadn't been developed. And I appreciated that a little bit more than I kind of had an understanding for. Between that and once my mentor was able to give me some sort of insight and I was able to see how fun it was, I learned that each transaction and each interaction is going to be a really big learning experience. It's not like rinse and repeat that sometimes we can see a lot more in traditional residential sales. So I liked being able to learn unique things about the geography, even the geology or the history and archaeology of the land. Like, there's all sorts of things that might come up depending on where properties are located, especially if they're being used for something a little bit more high density than just recreation pieces.
Yeah, I think the big thing when I think about land, I think with most residential closing, it's kind of more cookie cutter in the sense that, like, not that it isn't always like that, but a lot of the transactions are pretty like straightforward, and there's not much in terms of like, this is what it is. The contracts are, like I said, the contracts are already kind of like done for you a little bit. And so there's less kind of like knobs to negotiate.
I have more of a black and white checklist with my residential transactions, while I might actually have a flow chart for the land deals that might be, if this, then we accomplish these steps. So I think having to think through those things is what I enjoy. And of course, getting out to be outside and enjoy pretty property and see animals is a fun perk.
Yeah. I tell people all day that obviously I do stuff similar to you. I sell large pieces of dirt all the time.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely different, and being able to view the land, and especially we sell like large acreages of land. So it is a very kind of different aspect to real estate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though, like, in terms of like land, that's like where 90% of it is.
Yeah.
And then the other, like, only a small percentage is actually like selling houses.
Yeah. It can be a much bigger picture. You can be able to sell a property multiple times and be involved in it for 5-10 years if you're really going through like big development projects. So a little bit more than just those one and done.
So one thing in particular that I thought was interesting about you is, well, there's many things, but is that you not only do you sell land, but you kind of do a lot of I guess like subdivisions or you help people with doing subdivisions. And I'm curious, like, you just work on the selling aspect, or do you have any involvement in terms of like entitlements or any development work?
So I'm personally not doing entitlements, but I am walking my clients through processes to make it easier for them to get things entitled. For example, I've got a project that is just north of the Austin Metroplex that we are looking at doing, more than 500 home sites. It has been a long undertaking. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to identify that property probably 2 years ago, went through a drought, didn't have any water. So that project pretty much fizzled out. And once we learned of a new opportunity to get water to the project, we were able to continue along that. So putting those pieces together to know that, oh, there's another water municipality that's willing to serve this. And, oh, let's look at this process, which isn't very common for a lot of people to do, to go through and literally have like legislation go through to sign off on the rights to service this area to give it to another local water provider. It's something that's different. And then putting that transaction together with multiple parcels in order to make that work. So all of those things I've been able to have pieces on, and getting to be able to get that contract into the developer's hands and see and go to the meetings with city managers and commissioners to see if they like the project or not. So we haven't gotten that one to full entitlement or closing yet. But what I can say is from previous experiences, I've been able to get in on that later end and help with identifying builders and bringing that next step, which I was able to do earlier in my career with some other folks.
One thing that you kind of like that I learned about so I do a little bit of development work. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I learned quickly is that water is one of the major restrictions about like if developments get built or not.
Yeah.
Just in terms of like, you need to have the right size pipe. And then is the city or county, are they okay with like giving you water access?
Yes, that is a massive, massive issue, especially here in Texas. And when I was teaching this subdivision class to some of these some of these participants, as I mentioned before, many of them from other parts of the country, Northeast, they didn't understand how and what our water problem really looked like. And we had to explain the growth and development. And so there are places in the country that are seeing this explosive growth. And there's other places like us that are seeing the growth and have the drought that we've had that's really sucked our lakes dry. And that truly puts a halt on any development, because if you don't have water, you don't have home sites, you don't have anything. And many times in a lot of these areas in Texas that are being developed, they may fall in a water development district where you have to get permission to even drill a well. So it's just because you don't have water lines doesn't automatically mean you can just dig down.
It's not game over.
It's not, yeah. I mean, you might be able to drill a well, but still you might not be able to, because they might not have enough water in the aquifer. And the reason they have these development boards is to ensure that these new wells that go in, they are not going to just suck all the water dry for all the neighbors. They make sure that there's water there for at least 30 years before they approve. So they're making efforts to ensure that water is there.
Yeah.
But lots of scary things with developments in Williamson County and other parts of Texas that aren't able to move forward because of the lack of water, and everything is just stopped.
Yeah, I agree completely. And one of the things that I've kind of learned about with water is like, if you think about the United States, like most of all the major cities are kind of on the east side of the United States. And if you look kind of like, if you split up the United States in half, the west side doesn't have that many major cities. And the number one reason for that.
Oh, wait, they're on the coast, right?
Well, yeah, obviously the
where
coast.
There's water.
Yeah.
But it's not fresh water, but still, that's about the only places where we see some of the bigger cities.
Yeah. I think across the world, all the major cities are along coast. But what makes the U.S. kind of special is that the reason why there's still like a significant amount of more cities in the east side, other than that's where we're initially colonized, is that there's the Mississippi River.
Right.
It's like, I mean, I think it's the largest river in the world, or like one of them, or like internally going through
North America, I believe. But yes, but and then the thousands of tributaries and all of that. And I believe there's additional rainfall that parts of the United States gets, which leads to all of those things. Yeah.
So because of that, a lot of like internal cities on the east, we'll call like east side of the United States, they're able to be more heavily like populated. And where if you go to the west side, it's more rare.
Yes, you do deal with some of the drought and things like that. I think that's a really good point. And I think I've seen a similar map to what you've seen with that. And it's really kind of interesting and shocking to see how it's distributed when you see where the water and the rainfall is within
a lot
the US
of it has to do with like where the aquifers, if the US had to redo their states, like I made a post about this, but about like if they had redone their states to be more lawns of like aquifers in the natural form of the land, that it would make it it'd make it easier to have more cities, because what happens is a lot of like natural resources are divided up between multiple states
and jurisdictions.
Yeah, and because of that, like what one state does might affect the water from another state, and so like and they have different aligning interests.
So the fact that they're not able to work together, even though it's really the same pool of water, conflicts and makes it a little bit harder. But that makes complete sense if we were all just kind of on the same page and it was the same group controlling the same water, might be able to have a little bit more.
Exactly. And then like what you do at like the top of the stream and the bottom of the stream, like if you're only controlling the top, you don't really care about like what happens at the bottom necessarily.
Right.
And so, I mean, I understand that like you should, but like each state has different priorities, and their priority is to get water. So long story short, like because of that, like at least that's the biggest reason I think that there isn't as many major cities.
I think, that has a lot to do with it. That makes a lot of sense.
So I'm curious too, like, what is kind of like your ideal client, or like the type of clients that you like to work with in terms of like, is it just people who just buy and sell land, or is it like mainly for home builders, or like who's it for?
I like being able to have those one-on-one relationships with an individual that understands that maybe what their project and what their goal is might be a little bit more unique and it needs more expertise. And so they appreciate some of the things that I know. So that might be a builder that is a regional builder, is having a desire because there is... their land acquisition manager is like, okay, I'm doing some good stuff here. Let me get in this investment game. So he and I have partnered up, and I am assisting with some of their personal projects, but might be associated with the builder. And so having those nice relationships that trust and know my specialty really helps. I know one that I'm excited to chat with here soon is a neighbor that was listing his home. He listed with a friend of his, yet connected with me because he knew I knew about land things. So he started asking all these questions, gave him some black and white info so he could do his research. And then it turned out a family member was actually, through a court case, was given some property that he might now be able to purchase. And so we're going to have a talk and try and understand, because it's not a black and white situation with that, right? Yeah. We have to find out how much property was being awarded. Are they going to subdivide it? Is he going to buy it from them? So I like it when somebody might already have either a rural mentality and maybe they're coming to the city and they need someone that understands, hey, my property is in a transitional area. We want to make sure it's marketed right. Or somebody that's in the city moving out to the country. So it's really kind of spreading that gap of that transition of either that raw land becoming something more as it's developed, or helping those people that have that desire for that homestead to go out in the country and create it too.
Yeah, that is one thing it's interesting to think about evaluating land, how like similar lands that even are close to each other can be valued very differently based off like zoning, floodplain, like does it have utilities? I think that's one thing that kind of separates like residential from land, is that you it's not like super easy to just get like a comp.
Yeah.
It's just it's a different ballgame, because you can just compare similar houses, but with land it's very different in the fact that like there's just so many different aspects, and even the next door lot can be valued very differently.
Yes. I have a specific situation that, without giving too many details away, just because you have 20 or 30 acres that is immediately next to a parcel that is being developed by a nice builder does not automatically mean that what they paid for that property is what you're going to get.
Yeah.
What that builder paid for most likely is a fully entitled, ready to go property, which means there was a year and I don't know, $100,000, $200,000 worth of investigation, details and everything that were done. And they handed that over to the builder, obviously at a premium for all of that work.
Yeah.
So Mr. Neighbor, have you done all of that work? No. Okay, we're looking at a very different price because this is going to take us a while and time to investigate it and make sure we can even do what you think we can do to develop it.
Just to kind of like educate kind of my my listeners, can you talk about like what's the difference between like raw land and then maybe paper lots or like entitled?
Yeah, absolutely. So a piece of raw land, what we would be talking about here is going to be something that might have zoning, it might have restrictions, it might have covenants, but it has not been fully zoned or determined its highest and best use. The entitlements and that type of sale is figuring out the highest and best use for that property in that location in today's demographics. And finding that out requires you to determine how many lots are you going to put in? What is the most likely demographics of who's going to move there? So how big are those homes? What are those prices? So all of that back-end information to determine, okay, this neighborhood is going to look like 40 homes, price point's going to start here. All of those predetermined pieces have to be done. And that's getting approvals from roadways, for utilities, and just everything within the county. So,
yeah, I think, entitlement work is kind of like essentially like talking with the city or county, figuring out best use, but more importantly, it's not just figuring out best use, but actually like getting approval from the city or the county.
Yes, or having it at least applied for and you're given the green light and say maybe the property just needs to change hands and you file this final fee and then you can go ahead and start building.
Yeah.
Those are the types of things.
And so just so I understand, I think the main value add to like getting that done is so that like a builder doesn't have to go through the talk with the city or the county. They can just literally like the second they buy it, they can just build.
Yes. And that's going to shorten your contract time. That's going to shorten and make it a much quicker and easier sale. Because many times these builders and developers have to negotiate these long periods of contracts. And the home and the property owner does not like sitting and waiting 8 to 12 months to get this thing sold.
Yeah, because they want to know that it's going to actually be done.
Yeah. But if they had done the preliminary work to verify and check on these things, it might only be 60 or 90 days to get that done because they're just double checking the boxes that the seller said has already been completed. And then if that's the case, they can start building within those first couple of weeks. That is the best thing because they are actually able to start moving forward with sales that much quicker instead of holding them and waiting and not having anything to sell.
One thing you said earlier was that you worked, or it sounded like you work with a lot of land acquisition managers. Or at least
it sounds like I have, but it's only probably been about like 4 to 5.
Okay.
And a lot of developers. I've talked with a handful of developers that work in the Austin area. I've had good relationships with many builders and land acquisition folks in the area. But just being in the industry for 10 plus years, talking with builders and being on this side that's straddling the actual residential sale and going from the dirt to the houses. I've been able to gain a lot of resources.
Yeah,
there.
I think if you work with a lot of like land acquisition managers, those are like ones that were like for bigger builders.
Yeah.
Those are the type. And so at least for me right now, a lot of the stuff I've done is with smaller builders that don't like they are the land acquisition manager.
Yeah, it's a one person shop, just like it is for an individual realtor most of the time, unless you have that big team and then you hire it out like those big builders. That's another way to look at it sometimes.
So yeah, I think that's like kind of like if you're especially if you want to get into subdivisions or land development, those are like good people to like reach out to.
You're going to probably form some of the better relationships because you're going to be there from the growth phase with some of those people as well and helping them get bigger and jump into the market. I've seen a lot of great success with those mid-range builders as well, because they don't have the full, we have to do it vertically in-house. We don't, we want to take the dirt and turn it over ourselves. They may buy into a neighborhood that might already be, selling well, but they need a different product mix. And so they might come in there and take down a section. So those sometimes give you a nice mix of a little bit more transactional, a little bit bigger deals. And they may only have like one or two people you really need to get close with.
Yeah, I think that'd be it's definitely a good spot to. I think it's one of those, but it's one of those things where I think you have to probably form a relationship over a period of time before you're comfortable enough to, or they feel comfortable enough for you to find land for them. Or how does that process work? Do you like? How do I say this? Other than like forming a relationship, they kind of give you like criteria, and based off that criteria, you kind of find land for them?
Yeah, I reach out and I'll say, hey, I'm seeing these projects in this area. Is this an area that you would want to grow into? And my partner there may say, well, you know what? Yeah, there's a lot of growth. There's a lot of opportunity. We want to get in there. This is one of our competitors. That would be good. Look for something out there. Or if there is already a project on the ground to get us in. To be quite honest, many of the times, these guys do have their real estate license, so they might be going out and finding those properties on their own, but then they bring me in to resell, market it, flip it. So I don't always get to see their stuff until after they've purchased it, and I don't take that personally.
Okay.
That's how they go and do their business. So I'm able to at least have that respect that they're like, well, we could do this part, we negotiated this part, but we can't flip it and turn it unless we've got you on board to help us. And so that's one of the things that I have seen actually quite a bit, because I think at least 40 to 50% of who I work with also has their real estate license.
I did not know that about that, but that makes, aren't you ever concerned that like they just buy the land themselves?
Yeah, and they sometimes do.
Well, that hurts your feelings.
Not when I get to resell it at a much higher percentage and break it up 4 times.
Okay, then it works out okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine. I can get 8 transactions out of that one.
And they're happy to like give that to you.
Yeah, we'll figure out what's fair amongst everyone. But yeah, I mean, earlier on the offset, I did get a little bit. I don't know. I had the misunderstanding. I'm like, well, why wouldn't you have called me involved? And I'm like, oh, you bought it basically just like a for sale by owner. Just going off as an individual to do this to save money because you're going to need to pay me on the resale side.
Okay. It's interesting. So one of the things too that you kind of talked about is, so when you're looking for like land for like subdivisions, what have in the past, what have been kind of like the key criteria that they've wanted to know about the land to see if it's like has potential for development?
Road frontage.
Road frontage is number one?
Road frontage is really, really big. Being able to have something out of the floodplain that's got like a minimal grade, so you don't have to bring in fill. Having something...
So minimal grade, you're talking about like steepness of the property.
Yeah, steepness of the property. It's beautiful to have those hill country views, yet you're going to be at a different level of development cost if you're going to have a 10-foot slab in those like hill country views. So if you're truly looking to have, and you're going in there staying really conservative, having something of your expectations of it's reasonable for you to go in and fill and balance it so that the properties can properly drain. You're going to look to avoid floodplain. You're going to look for where the school districts are, where health and education are around there. Of course, utility availability has all those things. I mean, to me, it's the shape, the frontage of the land, what utilities are there, and then you get into the grade, the slope, the features, and demographics within the area. Okay.
That's a pretty comprehensive list of all the things. Like you said, I think, floodplain. And I think I agree with you about the steepness, because the steeper it is, essentially, like, I think what a lot of builders care about is their unit count. And so the steeper it is, they can't make as many homes based off that.
Now, there are luxury homes saying Bee Caves, Westlake, things like that they are counting on those views and those, those steep cliffs and hill country
but
things.
They're not doing volume on that.
Right. I mean, they've got 4 different custom builders that are doing those real expensive homes that are able to do that. So we see it's just a different product mix and a different business plan, different business model. So, and also I see that mostly in that Southwest and Hill Country corridor. And so that's where people are doing that. When it's more in, this Central Texas area where we see typically flat properties, yes, we're trying to get as many rooftops in as we can, because otherwise the money isn't there.
Yeah, and I think Austin's very unique in the fact that it's a very hilly city. It's not like Houston, where it's Houston is fairly flat. Austin is
Dallas flat,
yeah, and Austin is not.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the big differences. Okay, one of the things I'm also curious too is, do you do a lot of parcel subdivides, divide and then sell the lots individually, or is that something you don't really do too much of?
Yeah, we've done that. Usually when we do those types of things, I had a lot of clients, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, probably longer, gosh, and more of the mid, 2015, 2016, I'll say. Those ranchette lots were real popular. And we had a lot of those coming up. And mostly it was just because it was easier to cut up 100 acres into 10 acre lots because there wasn't as much rules and regulations.
I think anything below 10, you can't get ag exemption anymore.
Typically.
Every county is different.
Yeah.
But it's typically 10. And then,
just a lot of platting rules.
There's platting rules that are all removed after 10.
Yeah, typically, not all counties are created equal, obviously, on these items, but we're seeing a lot of those same perspectives. And some of them are still, even if it's been subdivided at 10 acres, they are adding additional rules that you have to have a subdivision or permit. You have to have a septic permit, because if you're subdividing those, they're expecting somebody to probably be building there. And so certain counties are requiring you, before you even sell it, to get that permit taken care of. So each county behaves slightly different on this, yet it is pretty similar that those are the easy subdivisions, and people are enjoying having those larger homesteads like we saw after COVID. So that's a little bit, I guess, part of that. I'm seeing, because our area has transitioned so much in those few years, that it's smaller lots and we're not seeing as much of that, or those properties are just being turned over at this point.
Okay. Oh, you kind of reminded me of something too I would ask you about when it came to smaller lots is, I'm not sure if you're aware or not that I think, over the last year, Austin, city council, they passed a home amendment. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, what kind of effect do you think that's going to have? In regards to the subdivision and all? Yeah, subdivision, because I think the major changes in the rules was they reduced the minimum lot size, and then they're allowing essentially all residential lots to have the ability to have 3 units on a lot. Yeah. I've got a property that's zoned R3 in the Austin area, and I think it's 60 by 150. Mm-hmm. And that just surprises me that they are saying that you are able to put 3 units on that. And we're saying you can build up. Yeah.
You can build up to. Yeah. Yes, which is very interesting, but they're trying to avoid the term ADUs, I think, and they're trying to call them just multiple residential units.
Yeah, that's how that is. Yeah.
So I think it's going to be interesting. I'm hoping that this contract we've got is going to work out, because that's what they want to do, is they want to do 2 or 3 on there. I don't know realistically if you can do that with impervious cover, utility
you still have
needs.
To follow all the rules.
You still have to follow those. So it's just but are you just teasing us when you're saying we can do up to 3? Mm-hmm.
I've only seen a few lots that have been able to do it.
It's usually 2 is the most.
It's just tough because you have all those restrictions from setbacks, impervious cover. It's really tough to pull off 3, but you can definitely get 2 most of the time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it seems counterintuitive to some of the stuff that I thought they were doing, but I understand we are in a housing crisis issue, and they are trying to figure out the best way to balance to ensure that we can still grow some of these areas, because we know homes are, certain areas they're older and they're being replaced. And so they want to make sure that they can build something that we can get enough people in.
So in my opinion, I think it's hard to say if it's going to be good or not. But I think for the longest time, the last 5 or 10 years, a lot of the development in Austin has all been kind of on the outskirts.
Yes.
And so this will this will open the idea to more development internally, because people can essentially build multiple homes on a lot. It makes it more manageable. And it's probably one of the biggest regulation changes to for land code in Austin, a long time, maybe a few decades.
Really allowing more infill that some of the suburbs and things have been able to do in some of those smaller downtown areas. And then Austin has just had these regulations, and now it's trying to give that opportunity so that they can fill in those and get a little bit more developed in town for once.
Okay, nice. Well, let's switch topics a little bit. One of the things I'm curious about you, which is different from many of my other guests, is that you do a lot of teaching. And I've noticed that a lot of teachers, at least because everyone's required to take TREC classes, and so you notice that a lot of the teachers are also realtors themselves. But I've never had the thought of I wanted to be a teacher, but you had that thought.
I did. I had that crazy thought. So when I was really getting into understanding some more of these land topics and nuances, and very much baby level compared to where you're at or where probably many of your listeners are. I was just very barely getting it. And I realized there wasn't a whole lot of help and education out there. And I was really flustered by that, because I'm I see the need. I see that it's there. And so at one point in my office, I created a mastermind talking with agents, and I said, okay, you guys do a lot of residential, but we live in the Georgetown, Williamson County area. So there's a lot of land around us. So naturally, a couple properties might be, a couple acres with a manufactured home, or an estate and a few acres, or just a raw piece of land that someone wants to build on, or something out in the country. Well, they had those experiences, but they never really had education on it. So we broke down and talked about some of the challenges. And a lot of what I was struggling with was when to use which type of contract, what's most appropriate, where are those classes to get additional in-depth, nuanced resource. And I was I'm figuring out when to use which of these contracts and what the situation is. And that seemed to fill a niche for those agents that were selling homes and occasionally selling some pieces of land. And I wanted to help the agents learn, because they knew enough about real estate. They're usually pretty smart cookies. Yeah. And so I'm able to, I don't have to start at the very beginning and give them the full education of what to do with the land like I might with a brand new client. So to me, I saw an opportunity for referrals, consulting, and education, because if they saw me as a trusted resource, maybe we could work together on their deals. Or maybe if I needed an expert in a certain field and they had that, we could team up and be able to co-work and do certain things together, or do types of referrals in that way. So I saw it as a benefit to learn from other people, but I also saw the lack of knowledge. And I'm this seems like an easy way to spread the gap. And then when there was agents that were too afraid to do those transactions, they happened to call me. And then I started realizing, oh, that is actually a great way to do some lead generation, is educating my colleagues. Because first of all, when they're on the other side of the deal, it's going to make my life so much easier if I don't have to educate them in answering some of these more basic questions. And if it helps them get more business, they are going to, in turn, be grateful for me, and we're going to help each other in our business. So to me, it was a really good win-win, especially for, the office and the community that I was in that was kind of missing that. And then from there, I realized there was another amazing rock star woman that I wanted to follow in her footsteps, who was doing land after my mentor retired. And that's where I found all the groups and decided to really get more involved in some of the specialty. But really, it just started with that 1 to 2 hour class mastermind talking about, when are we doing residential? When is it land? Which contract do we need to use? Because our promulgated contracts have specific paragraphs that are very important if you're selling different types of land. But when we have a lender involved, sometimes that lender is the one telling you what contract they want that deal on. Well, we need to make sure we're protecting our clients still. So,
no, I get that completely with the contracts. Yeah, that is true. I've had that happen come up where lenders like they kind of care about especially the title of the contract. But at the same time, like you gotta sometimes there's like I guess disagreements.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out how to like come to some compromise.
Right.
And so that can be tricky sometimes. And one of the things that kind of just caught my eye or just thought of is like, my head is like, okay, this is a great way to teach people, but I kind of didn't think about the other aspect of what you said about it being lead gen, because that makes a lot of sense because they're like, oh, this is too complicated for me. They'll just give you the business. They might ask you to help, either advise them, give you the business, or like will want to partner up with you potentially.
And 90% of the time it's partnering up, or they want to give me the business. And I ask them some questions. I'm like, you don't want to give that to me. That's your person. That's your client. I don't need to have any interaction with them. You're smart. You're just missing a couple pieces. Let's you and I powwow and consult on the side and make sure and double check that we've got all the pieces to make sure your clients, best interests are taken care of, whether it's on the contract marketing or, positioning a property. And so I really enjoy doing that. That's one of my favorite things.
Okay. I'm curious, is there any like big takeaways you've gotten from like teaching students from being a teacher, or anything you've kind of like learned, or just interesting things that have come up?
Most of the time, there's definitely a lot of smarter people in the room than me.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Just because I'm up there doesn't make me...
I see.
I have the knowledge of the material that I'm sharing, but there may be plenty of other life and real life experience that it's not fair for me to assume that the right thing is for them to listen to what I have to say. Sometimes we need to learn from the rest of the participants. I had some really, really, really impressive folks in my online subdivision session from all over, some talking about the challenges they've had with certain types of developments, and others were telling me how they were able to put one of these equations together to go through and use that to justify to a community development board why their community wasn't being able to bring in homes and things. And it was because of their fees, things like that. And it made sure that there was no way anybody could ever make money. He did that and they were able to make some changes, and now things are starting to grow a little bit more. So, I mean, it's just like, wow. That's
actually really smart. Like, yeah, they kind of show that like the rules are making it in a way like it's impossible for anything to happen because it's not cost effective for a builder to come in.
Yes. A lot of these folks may not understand all the details and all the hands that go into it. So simply explaining the other side and the position and say, hey, this is how they're running their business. And you can imagine there's going to be half a dozen people involved in this for over a year. They're going to need to get paid. They're going to have to make sure the builder gets paid. And so if we have all these exorbitant fees and you have a community that, doesn't have this, endless income, you've got to really be ready to figure out what you can do to stop those fees to make sure it can be developed and grown.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people don't realize, or at least especially with the city councils or counties, is sometimes they always kind of think of like, oh, builders are just in this for the money, which there's some truth to that.
It is a business.
It is a business, but like they're taking on sometimes significant risk. They're putting all this work into entitlement work, paying for all these engineers, and then it takes a long time for them to get paid. And they're just taking a sizable risk. And sometimes people don't like think about like they're putting a lot of money with not like a guaranteed return.
Yeah. If you could imagine putting out $500,000 in expenses in a year, but you don't know if you're going to get them back for 2, 3, or 4 years.
Yeah.
How many people want to do that?
Yeah. Not a lot of people.
Yeah. You have to really know what you're doing and know that it's worth it and it's going to come around, but it might be painful getting there.
Exactly. So there's a risk. And so you got to make it like, you got to make it city. I feel like that happens a lot with like city councils and counties in general. Like they're not kind of thinking about it from the financial perspective. Like when how they do the regulations and then working with builders, sometimes they're kind of hard on them.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one thing that there could be more improvement in having, because it's not, from my experience, it's not always a very like collaborative process. Or it can be, but a lot of times like there's not like as much give and take as I think there should be.
Yeah, one of the things that I was really kind of honing in earlier today was there are certain things that you do want to be transparent about and what your goals are for marketing. And clearly there's things you're going to hold tight to the chest. But if you have these black and white goals of what you're trying to accomplish and you're not sure if that's even going to be possible, it's well worth putting that up front to make sure you're not wasting time of that government official or whatever. I mean, if you're trying to do a development and you do want to have some commercial at the very front, you should probably talk at the beginning with your city officials and make sure that that's what they're on board for. So you play things close to the chest, but also you want to make sure that you're transparent about what you're trying to do. And in a couple of instances, the city said, "Oh, that is wonderful. Actually, we would like more of that. If you need to make adjustments and you need to expand that commercial section, that wouldn't be a problem with us."
Yeah.
Type of thing. So, yeah. Just a little bit more input.
What one of the things you kind of we were talking about it as like the financial side, and I'm curious, like what are like kind of like the costs like for builders? We kind of touched on it briefly, but if you can expand on it, like the cost that like developers for doing some type of like either a subdivision or just dividing up land.
So the most like basic plan development is going to be utilizing a surveyor or site engineer. 5, 10, 20,000, depending on the size of the project, location of it, those types of things. You're going to be potentially adding on permitting fees in order to get water, to get electricity. For example, each water tap going into a neighborhood may cost $8,000 per water tap. So you have to take those costs into account. Who is taking that on? Is that the developer, or are you going to put that onto the builder as part of your lot fees? And from there, lots of additional re-edits with site plans, sending it for city approvals. So if you're doing something small, you might be able to get away with less than 50,000. You might be looking at more like 200,000. I know one of my clients is well in excess of 250,000 for like a decent sized project.
Yeah.
And that's still, I mean, it's a lot of money. And that was also part of our negotiation. If things went south, we would provide those details to the seller. And so that's another interesting negotiating factor that we see a lot is that, hey, even if they had to wait and work with us for all that time, at least they're getting the information that we're getting that is so expensive and costly. And they probably wouldn't have the ability to go out and get it.
Yeah. So then they have that for forever.
Yeah, they have that, and that hopefully can help them get it
sold by somebody else with that information. I think, I've used that technique, or like if you want to, especially if you want a longer due diligence period, sometimes that kind of like information is like, okay, we're going to be spending thousands of dollars here. So worst case, you still have the property, obviously, and then you have all this other like documentation about your property. So that's some of the value.
Exactly.
How long does so in your experience, it's hard. I know it's very case by case basis, but how long does like development normally take? Like, say if you're doing like a smaller subdivision,
or getting it ready to build, or
just get it like shovel ready.
Oh, to get it shovel ready.
So you haven't built yet, but you've done everything. You've done like kind of all the. You haven't done any digging and you haven't done any building. You're just talking with the city from like raw land.
And how big? Like
let's say 30. Let's say like 30 acres. Let's say a smaller subdivision, 30 acres.
In town? In a smaller town, I would say
in a smaller town. Let's go smaller.
That's going to say 9 months.
Okay, that sounds about right.
I'd say 9 months, and I'm thinking about a specific project. It's a townhome regime, but I'm thinking of a specific project, and based on when like the zoning changes and the approvals, I think that's about the time it took.
That sounds about right. My experience is somewhere between 6 months being the fastest.
Yeah.
And then 2 years, sometimes they can take up to.
Yeah. Especially if you run into other hangups and other issues, for sure. Like we've got endangered species, or if you have floodplain mitigation or weird roadways that haven't been expanded, or you might be getting an extra lane and they won't let you do anything until that's completed. So
One of the biggest hacks I've learned with like talking with the city or with the county is like meet them in person.
Oh my gosh, yes.
You got to meet them in person, because sometimes like they get hundreds of emails, and just meeting them in person, just knowing who you are, They're just more likely to work with you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Having that face-to-face is integral so that they actually know who you are in case you do need to call in a favor. They have that face and that recognition, and you're the one that actually gives them the time of day to go meet with them.
Mm-hmm. Now, I got sidetracked on some of the financing stuff. But
yeah, no, it's fun to kind of talk about the nuances of it because that does get more in the weeds than other people usually are.
But I think it's important because most people are in real estate is to make money.
Yeah.
I mean that's ultimately, they want, like, you want to not only make money, but you also want to like build communities, or especially with land. And if you're doing any type of like subdivision development, a big part of it is like you want to build communities that people want to live in. I think that's one of the good things about being it is that you have the opportunity to create a lot of homes that didn't exist before.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool to see. I recently had a residential home that was referred to me from somebody out of the area, and it happened to be on a tract of land that was part of a neighborhood that I helped them subdivide 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I was able to, that was my third transaction on at least one part of that property in the last 10 years.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. So it's neat being able to come back and see those things.
So one of the things you'd mentioned, or you talked to me off camera, is that you're planning to go to Argentina and do some work there. And I'm like, what is happening? How did this come about?
The coolest thing in my career. Yeah. So I had a great mentor, team leader, manager, friend named Scott Tolar. He's in the Florida area. And he is a team leader with one of the larger real estate companies. And he was, we're going to be saying it's Keller Williams. And he connected me to some individuals in Argentina because one of the neat things that Keller Williams has been able to do is branch off and do some worldwide, basically launching worldwide divisions. So we've got Keller Williams Spain, Keller Williams France, Keller Williams wherever, including Brazil, Spain. I think there's 70 or 80 different countries that we are in, which is great and cool in and of itself. Yet as these new countries are growing, they are seeing the different communities and the niches that we have here in the U.S. And in Argentina, one of the more dramatically unique to them, in addition to other larger countries, is land expertise. And so they are creating a Keller Williams land division. And we began talking a little over a year ago, and I was just giving him the details of what it looks like here. So he can translate and see the bigger picture for what Argentina can be created into so that he can create a group of educated agents that can help some of these landowners and these what are transitional areas in that country around these major cities, and making sure that the property owners are being taken care of and they're getting these fair and equitable deals so that developers are not coming in to take advantage of them. And they're educating their residential agents that there is a specialty of people selling land, and that's an opportunity for them to learn additional expertise or get referrals or just learning about that. And one of the coolest things is they've got a lot of similarities to, this is my personal opinion, a lot of similarities to Texas and Mexico in the topography, land features, obviously Spanish speaking, but they are huge into wine and beef. Okay.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
I can definitely say that I'm familiar with some of the cattle industry and getting even more so. So sharing with them different organizations and groups that they may have or that are growing in Argentina for them to pair up with and team up with for their agents, making sure that they're giving the different nuanced opportunities for that. And I think a lot of it's just really letting people know what it is and what it can be so that they can be one of the first of the newer, some of the newer countries to create a land division. So yeah, it's really neat and exciting. And I'm thrilled to be able to go out there. And in March, we will be in Buenos Aires for their Keller Williams Argentina family reunion. And that's where they're going to be launching that land event.
And so a lot of the work you'll be doing there is more on the teaching side?
I'm going to be consulting. I think consulting is a little bit of a better way because I'm going to be learning from their culture, what's on the ground there, and ensuring that I can try and give other opportunities based on what we see here. And just to give them different ways to be able to grow that, or just different perspectives of ideas that they may not have seen before.
Okay. Interesting. Is there I don't know how much work you've done, how much consulting you've done so far, but is there kind of like any major differences between how Texas does it or the US does it in Argentina and when it comes to land?
Well, they just got like third-party financing. So that means they just got like mortgage type products.
Before
I don't know all
there's just cash.
What I understand.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and we were whining about our commission lawsuit, and I'm like, you guys, we have mortgages.
Yeah.
Trying to think about some bigger pictures because it looks very different for other people in our careers across the world.
Yeah, notice that outside the U.S., like getting like third-party financing with a bank is not the same. It's fairly straightforward here. You may not get like, here's like our high interest rate is like 8 or 9. And over there, like one, it probably doesn't exist. And if it does, it's very, very, very high.
I mean, I'm sure the banks are figuring out how they want that to work, but something else, not anywhere near Argentina, but in the country of Iceland, I learned something very interesting. When properties are sold, the actual realtor is the one that takes possession of the money when the offer is made. When the offer is written, they send you the money.
Oh, so there's no escrow agent.
No. So you have a $500,000 house you're selling. I'm buying it and I have my realtor wire you the $500,000 for this house.
Okay. What happens if the realtor takes the money and runs? Life sucks for you?
Iceland's a very small country with only, I think, like 30,000 people there.
So you can't
really hide too far, from what I understand. But yeah, no, our tour guide, Ragnar, he's absolutely amazing. He was like, oh yeah, I'm a realtor. This is how it works. And then one of my friends there that I met up with was saying, yeah, no, it's scary. And those realtors hold on to that money and don't respond to the offer because they have short-term interest accruing accounts. And so they're trying to make money. Yeah.
I guess 500,000 even for like a couple days is decent. It actually be like
some money.
It could be like, it wouldn't be that much. It'd be like $20 or $30 a day, which is still a lot for a day.
I don't know. Yeah. Just very interesting things. I'm not sure how I got this bigger, like international, just kind of learning about some of these real estate facts, but it's definitely interesting to compare and just try and put your head around.
I'm curious if, at least for me, I'd be kind of scared to buy any land outside the U.S. or not even just outside to me, even outside of like Texas, I'd be kind of nervous because it's kind of like I don't know enough about that market. But I'm curious if you're thinking about at any point buying land outside, like in Argentina or Iceland or wherever.
Not Iceland.
Not Iceland. You don't want to ask her the money to an agent.
We were there during some interesting weather this summer. That was quite interesting for a Texan. So, not Iceland, Argentina. Oh, that is such a romantic idea. I really don't know if I intend to do that. Other states, I've definitely checked out. I've got a lot of really great referral and networking connections that I would go to them right away, and we'd figure out how to do the deal. And I'm glad that I've got some good relationships and things there, but. Yeah, it's definitely an idea. We'll see.
Okay, it's an idea right now, but not like one that's moving right off the bat.
We're not, there is no active plans in any way, but I will say from everything I've researched, it might be hard pulling me back home from Argentina there.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, I know we're running, we only got a few more minutes left, but I'm curious, like at least for land investments, a lot of people you may work with are like either builders or like investors. Sometimes, and a big reason why they're asking you is to help them like make more money. But do you ever see yourself? I don't know if you've done this already. If you've started to do your own development project for yourself,
I have a property in mind that I have looked at that I may be that the seller is considering getting on the market soon, and I've already talked with some partners about how we would potentially go in. I would put a bunch of the initial outlay there, and then they would subdivide it into like 3 or 4 other parcels.
Okay, so
really easy, a light
like
one.
A miniature syndication almost.
Yeah. Now those would be smaller lots. They're like along a nice creek. But the people I'd be partnering with have that.
They got that figured out.
They've got that figured out. I have my expertise in certain areas. They know how to get those approvals and those plats done, and so that's why we hire them.
Yeah, I think a lot of realtors or in general, like they kind of realize too that they don't got a 401k plan, and so like especially when you get so much knowledge in this space and you've helped so many other people make money, that eventually they, at least in my experience, a lot of them go and eventually do it themselves.
Yeah, I know at least 5 or 6 realtor friends of mine that I could go to certain counties and be like, oh, there's so-and-so acres. And it's named after their last name. And so they have like the name right of, have their street named after them. And I see that and I'm like, oh, that's so-and-so's project that they said that they did 10 years ago.
Yeah. That's one thing I've noticed about like subdivisions is that a lot of times, like when whoever buys the land, it's generally the kind of like a deal that a lot of times they make is like whoever's ranch or farm it was, they'll keep that name and call that subdivision that.
It's creating that story with the piece of land, and that gives that romantic vision that we're not just like cutting something up and creating something sterile, and it's more authentic to what has been there, and giving a little nod to it. So the consumers like it's just a good feel good thing that's good for everyone.
I've noticed it like I live near like the Goodnight Ranch neighborhoods, and I've noticed like that's in Southeast Austin, and that like apparently at once upon a time the Goodnights owned all that land up there, and now they've like slowly pieced off things, and like this way a lot of their names are like everywhere.
Yeah, we have a neighborhood around the corner from me. It was the realtor's family land. It's called Patterson Ranch, and he has a bunch of his family members are the street names in there. So yeah.
I'm curious too, is there any like new projects other than you mentioned going to Argentina, but is there any kind of like new things that you're hoping to do for like new projects or like new things that you want to try out in your career?
Well, the one that I mentioned to you about the potential smaller little couple project one-off of cutting up one of those parcels. I want to see this neighborhood that I've been working on for 2 years come to fruition and close and see the horizontal construction get going. And I want to see that first water meter. It sounds so silly, but that was such a hang up and caused so much delay. And I thought we had everything worked out that first time, but the second time under contract, I think we're gonna get there.
Yeah. Oh, I think I remember you telling me about this project like a year ago.
Yep. Yeah. Wow. Do you see why I'm very excited for that?
Yeah.
We're still getting there.
Okay. That's I understand that. Like everything I've learned, and like especially with land development, a lot of times things take a lot longer than you would expect.
Yep.
Or just like you sometimes until you've done enough projects, like there'll be something that like you didn't expect that you'll get hung up on, and then sometimes it's tough to like. It's just not always easy to solve the problem quickly. Especially with counties, like things kind of move kind of slowly.
Yep, and they might change things on you midway through.
Exactly. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing in some sense. The counties go slow because they want to make sure they get things right, but sometimes it can be frustrating.
Absolutely.
So lastly, do you see kind of any trends with subdivisions in the central Texas area moving forward?
I feel like in our area, we're still in that recovery phase from like such big explosive growth during COVID. The same things that I feel like were important before are coming back around. And that is not feeling like you're right on top of your neighbor, having that office space, not necessarily tiny homes, not necessarily like mansions. I'm seeing modest reasonability, but not wanting to be on top of each other. And to me, that's kind of getting back to what I remember when I first started my career is some of the big goals for people, because I'm in the suburbs. So that's what a lot of that demographic.
That's interesting you say that, because I was actually going to think the opposite. Because I thought there'd be, at least moving forward, there'd be a lot more like mixed use.
I'm seeing that. I mean, yet the mixed use I'm seeing is 5 5 or 6 massive community developments of, 400 or 500 homes each. You've got a school, you've got, healthcare. And then you've got the one townhome community in the middle of all of that is putting the small residential commercial, which is, the dry cleaners, the nail salon, and the liquor store. And that's about the most of the mixed use I'm seeing where I'm at.
Okay.
Again, it's very different from when you get closer into town.
That's true. Because you live kind of in like the Round Rock-ish area, further outside.
Yes, definitely Williamson County, different vibes than Austin to a degree. So I always want to preface that to make sure I'm not skewing what you're asking and what you think. But that's what I'm seeing.
Okay. Well, Megan, I think I'm going to let you go. But if people want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to go about doing that?
Okay. So right now, our website's going to be the easiest. It's going to be nextmovecentraltexas.com. We've got a great tab at the top with Training with Turnipseed. You can see all of the classes that I offer, and as well as all of our listings that our team has and all of the opportunities we can offer to help.
Okay, I think that's it. So stay tuned to my next video, and please subscribe to my channel, and I'll have more videos coming to you soon.